There are places where the horizon itself feels alive, where the air trembles as if holding a memory too heavy to bear. In the far reaches of the desert, beyond the reach of maps and the mercy of shade, there lies such a place. Those who cross its dunes at dawn sometimes speak of light behaving strangely there, bending, blooming, vanishing, as though it is trying to hide something it cannot forget. They call it the kingdom beneath the sun, a city made not of stone, but of reflection and breath. When the first rays touch the sand, the mirage begins. A shimmer takes shape, faint spires of glass rising from the earth like frozen music, their peaks melting into the sky. Some travelers swear they've seen banners ripple without wind, or heard the faint toll of unseen bells carried by the breeze. But when they draw closer, there is nothing. Only the vast silence of sand, stretching endlessly in every direction. Ancient records from the caravan routes mention this region only once. A Babylonian scribe, writing nearly 3,000 years ago, spoke of a city of light that swallowed men whole, then gave them back as shadows. No one knew what he meant. Later scholars dismissed it as heat delirium, but a few, the dreamers, the wanderers, believed he had glimpsed something the desert meant to keep. The desert has always been a place of remembering and erasing. Every dune moves like a slow tide, burying one truth as it reveals another. Beneath its endless layers lie the bones of cities that once dared to challenge the horizon. Places like Ubar, the so-called Atlantis of the sands, whose towers were said to touch the stars before they crumbled into legend. Perhaps this kingdom was kin to them, a sister civilization that chose light instead of stone, illusion instead of permanence. At night, when the wind cools and the stars return to their rightful place, the land seems to hum faintly. Explorers have camped there, recording the sound, a low, rhythmic pulse, like a breath beneath the dunes. Some claim it's the earth exhaling heat. Others believe it's the echo of a buried city, a kingdom that learned how to hide itself from time by fusing with the desert's own rhythm. There's a legend told among the Bedouin about the priests of the dawn, keepers of that hidden realm. They believed the sun was not merely a star, but a god that consumed memory to keep the universe alive. Each morning, they gathered on crystal platforms to sing hymns to the rising light, offering fragments of their own history as sacrifice. Songs, names, entire dynasties, all surrendered to the brightness so their city could remain untouched by decay. Over generations, their devotion became their undoing. They gave so much of themselves to the sun that, one morning, when the light came, the entire kingdom simply disappeared. Archaeologists have searched for proof, shards of glass, fragments of metal fused by heat. A few have found curious relics, melted sand shaped like columns, as though architecture itself had liquefied under a sudden fire. There are also traces of an ancient canal system buried beneath the dunes, suggesting an organized settlement once thrived there. But the evidence stops just where certainty should begin. Every discovery is undone by wind, by distance, by time. The desert keeps no records, only impressions. Some explorers describe walking through air so dense with heat it feels like being inside a dream. They say the light bends differently, that shadows appear where there should be none. One traveler, a French cartographer in the 1800s, wrote that he saw his reflection standing beside him in the sand, moving independently, watching, then dissolving as he reached out. He returned home blind in one eye, claiming he had looked upon a sun too human to bear. His maps ended midline, the ink trailing off into nothing. Perhaps what he saw was not a mirage at all, but a memory replaying itself, the last flicker of a kingdom that learned to survive by becoming light. Among the surviving relics was a single tablet of clay, cracked and smoke-dark. It bore the emblem of an open eye surrounded by swirling lines, an ancient symbol found in Sumerian and early Babylonian ruins, believed to represent the watchful void, the spirit that observes all yet speaks nothing. Around the emblem, faint etchings could still be read. Words are the ashes of thought. Only silence endures. Scholars who studied the fragments noticed a strange uniformity in the burn marks, as though the fire had not spread from any single point but had ignited everywhere at once, consuming paper, wood, and flesh in the same instant. The heat had been so intense that sand outside the structure had fused into glass. It was as if a moment of pure light had descended. Neither flame nor lightning, but revelation itself. And still, the air there remains restless. Those who camp among the ruins say the wind grows warmer as night falls, curling through the hollows of collapsed walls, as if searching for something it lost. The ashes rise and swirl, catching moonlight like constellations of dust. At times, the patterns resemble script, shifting, untranslatable. The desert becomes a page that writes and erases itself again and again. In 1961, an archaeologist named Layla Kadir visited the site after a sandstorm revealed a new chamber beneath the central courtyard. Inside, she found a series of stone seats arranged in a circle, each one carved with different symbols of wind: spirals, feathers, open hands. In the center lay a basin filled with ash as soft as silk. When she touched it, she said it moved on its own, rising slightly as if breathing. That night, she dreamed of pages turning in endless darkness. In her dream, the words on them burned away, leaving only light. Layla returned to the site for 3 more seasons but never again entered that chamber. In her final field notes she wrote, "Perhaps the library still exists, only not for the living. Perhaps knowledge was never meant to be kept, only carried by the wind." Some believe the fire was divine punishment for forbidden study, the wrath of gods jealous of human curiosity. But others see it differently. They say the library chose to burn itself, a final act of protection, to prevent wisdom from becoming weapon, truth from hardening into tyranny. It turned its pages into flame so that what mattered most could rise, weightless, into the air. And so, the desert wind carries fragments of that lost knowledge still. Not as words, but as resonance. It moves across dunes, over mountains, through palms and cities, whispering through keyholes and cracks, entering the dreams of those who listen closely enough. Sometimes, it takes the form of sudden inspiration, a thought with no origin, a realization that feels older than the self. Maybe those are the voices of the burned, the librarians, the keepers, the seekers, still wandering in the current, ensuring that the world remembers what it has forgotten. When dawn comes, the ruins vanish again under the shifting sands. Only the faintest shimmer remains, like smoke clinging to the horizon. The air smells faintly of parchment and rain, though no rain has fallen here in centuries. Imagine it for a moment. Towers of translucent stone catching the sun in 1,000 hues. Streets paved with glass that shimmer like rivers. Libraries carved into crystal, where every page glowed with words written in reflection. Imagine priests in robes of gold and white, their faces veiled, walking silently at dawn to greet the sun. Imagine an entire civilization that believed disappearance was the highest form of devotion, that to be consumed by light was to be eternal. The library sleeps, but not in silence. For silence itself was always its language. And if you close your eyes now, you might hear it. A faint turning, a breath through pages made of air, a thought rising like dust. Perhaps the wind outside your window tonight carries one of its stories. Just a fragment, a sentence, or maybe only a single word. But even one word, if it survives the fire, can change everything. In the depths of a salt-crusted cave by the ancient sea, long after empires had turned to dust, explorers found a collection of masks. They were carved from obsidian and onyx, polished to mirror the firelight that flickered against them. Each face was lifelike yet unknowable, expressions caught between sorrow and command, divinity and decay. There were 7 in all, resting in a semicircle as if still attending some invisible council. The air within that chamber was different, thick, almost listening. No insects, no echo, only the slow drip of mineral tears falling from the ceiling. And in that silence, one could feel a presence, not haunting but watchful, as though the masks themselves were breathing softly through the centuries. Scholars named them the kings without names. Their craftsmanship was unlike any culture known to the region. Carbon dating failed to agree. Some pieces seemed Bronze Age, others impossibly older. Around their hollow eyes, tiny inscriptions spiraled inward in a language never seen again. not letters, but curves that resembled the motion of wind upon water. When illuminated, the carvings reflected faintly, like ripples under starlight. An archaeologist once remarked, "They look less made than remembered." Local legend speaks of a dynasty erased from every chronicle, rulers who sought to outlive time not through bloodline, but through secrecy. It is said they ordered their names struck from stone, their likenesses removed from coin and temple, until only the masks remained. Each mask was created at the hour of a king's final breath, molded not from his image, but from the silence left behind. And yet, there is sorrow in that beauty. For what is eternity if it leaves no trace? The priests who performed this rite were known as the keepers of the hollow faces. Their belief was simple and terrifying. Immortality could only be achieved through erasure. To be remembered was to decay. To be unseen was to endure. And so, each time a king died, his name was whispered once to the wind, and never spoken again. Centuries later, that silence became legend, and legend turned to ash. But the masks endured. When the cave was first opened to air after millennia, the obsidian surfaces clouded instantly, as if exhaling after a long confinement. Scientists described it as condensation, but those present said it felt like grief. Some swore that in the flicker of torchlight, the faces changed, the sorrow deepening, the mouths parting slightly, as though trying to speak. Among the artifacts found beside them were shards of gold leaf, fragments of woven linen, and the brittle remains of a scroll sealed in wax. Though half-burned, a single line could still be read. The eye sees until the self is seen, then the mask must return to silence. The meaning is unclear, but its weight lingers like dust on the tongue. In recent years, artists and historians have tried to reconstruct what these hidden kings might have looked like. But every attempt ends differently. Some render the faces youthful, radiant. Others depict them ancient and kind. No two reconstructions match. Perhaps this is fitting. Perhaps their power lies precisely in their unknowability. A few believe the masks were more than ritual objects. They might have been tools of transformation, worn not for disguise but for communion. Obsidian, after all, is volcanic glass born of fire and pressure. When polished, it reflects like water, turning the gaze inward. In ancient rites across Mesoamerica and Mesopotamia alike, such mirrors were believed to reveal not one's appearance but one's essence, the spirit unmasked. If the same was true for the kings without names, then their masks were not meant to hide, but to reveal, to strip away all illusion until nothing remained but presence itself. And yet, what is left when even the self is gone? Perhaps that is what they sought to learn. Those who have spent long enough in the desert say you can feel it, the ache of something just beyond sight. When the wind stops, and the sand stills, the air becomes heavy with longing. It is as though the land itself remembers the weight of walls, the sound of footsteps, the warmth of voices now turned to dust. You might stand there and feel a faint vibration beneath your feet. Not sound, but memory, whispering through layers of time. Today, the masks rest in a museum vault, sealed in glass, untouched by light. Visitors rarely see them. Their location is not listed on any public record. The curator in charge once admitted that when alone at night, she sometimes hears faint sounds from within the vault. Not words, but a low hum, like breath against glass. She said it feels as though the masks are waiting, not to be discovered, but to be remembered again, just long enough to vanish once more. To stand before one is to feel that paradox. Presence made of absence, form sculpted from void. You see your reflection upon the surface, then lose it. The line between your face and theirs begins to blur, and for a moment you understand what the kings desired, to become memory itself, unanchored from time or flesh. As the night deepens, the cave outside cools, and the air shifts like a sigh. The masks gleam faintly, black fire under starlight. Their hollow eyes watch, patient, eternal. Perhaps they are not kings at all, but mirrors, the reflections of every life that ever tried to outlast its name. When morning comes, the first light enters the cave and glances across their faces. For a brief instant, it catches within their glass-like depths, and you could swear one of them smiles. Then the light moves on, and all returns to stillness. The kings without names sleep again, wrapped in the salt and silence of ages. And somewhere beyond the reach of dawn, the wind still carries their vow soft, endless, unbroken. To endure, we must disappear. Far from any shore, beneath waters deep enough to turn sunlight into silence, there lies a drowned city. Divers who descend into its shadowed avenues speak of arches draped in coral, pillars blurred by centuries of silt, and courtyards where schools of silver fish drift like scattered prayers. And somewhere among those ruins, they say, there are bells, ancient and still ringing, their sound carried not through air, but through the bones of the sea itself. The Bedouins sometimes leave offerings when they pass. A handful of dates, a coin, a prayer murmured into the wind. They say it is a way to honor the kingdom that gave itself to the sun, a promise that its silence will not be forgotten. Some nights, travelers have seen faint orbs drifting over the dunes, pale spheres of light, hovering low, then vanishing. Scientists call it ionized air, a natural phenomenon. The desert, perhaps, calls it remembrance. The first record of the city comes from sailors of the early Byzantine coast. They spoke of hearing music at night when the moon was full, soft metallic tones that rose from below the waves. Some thought it the echo of their own rigging in the tide. Others believed it was the song of spirits mourning what the sea had taken. Over time, the stories grew into a single legend, that there was once a coastal kingdom, prosperous and proud, which vanished beneath the water in a single night of light and thunder. The chronicles call it Naratha, the city between tides. It was said to be a place of devotion, where temples faced the horizon so their bells could speak to the wind. Each morning at dawn, hundreds of them would sound together, not as alarm nor as call to prayer, but as gratitude to the returning sun. They believed that every ring carried a fragment of the soul into eternity. But one day the bells fell silent. Archaeologists who have studied the seabed near the ancient Gulf of Adria have found curious anomalies, symmetrical formations beneath layers of coral that appear carved, not natural. Marble blocks resting atop one another in deliberate pattern. And from certain fissures, the sea still exhales faint tones when currents pass through, long, low vibrations that resemble the deep resonance of bronze. In 1989, a team of Italian divers captured audio from one of these sites. What they heard was astonishing. A series of harmonic frequencies rising and falling in intervals almost identical to human composition. The recording, known today as the Naratha frequencies, was analyzed for years. Scientists explained it as natural resonance, the sea moving through hollow structures. But those who listened closely swore they could hear rhythm within the noise, a slow and deliberate pulse, as if something below still remembered the ritual. Legend says the priests of Naratha foresaw the end. They believed that water was not destruction but transformation, that the sea was the earth's great archive. And so, before the final storm came, they cast their temple bells into the depths, each inscribed with a verse of remembrance. They believed the ocean would guard their sound forever. Perhaps they were right. Divers who descend to the lower chambers speak of strange sensations, a warmth that moves through the body, a trembling in the chest. Some describe it as hearing the bells through their skin, as though their very heartbeat was being tuned to the memory of the sea. When they return to the surface, many report a lingering calm, an inexplicable stillness in the mind. One diver wrote in his journal, "It feels as if something down there forgave me. The ocean has its own kind of mercy. Beneath the shifting tides, time no longer behaves as it does above. Everything softens. The edges of stone, the meaning of centuries. A statue's face becomes coral, its crown a home for fish. Walls collapse into sand, and sand becomes floor again. The city breathes in cycles of ruin and rebirth, its bells resonating faintly in each movement. It is said that when whales pass nearby, their songs echo through the corridors, awakening the ancient frequencies. For a moment, the deep hums with layered voices, the living and the lost, joined in harmony. In the morning, when the horizon blazes gold again, the sand begins to shimmer once more, as though something beneath is stirring, remembering how to be seen. But it never fully emerges. The mirage rises, soft and trembling, just long enough to catch the eye, before folding back into the earth. Some nights, when storms pass over that part of the sea, coastal villagers claim they can hear the bells again. Not loud, not clear, just a tremor in the wind, a shimmer in the sound between waves. Fishermen tie small pieces of copper to their boats in respect, believing that the drowned city blesses those who remember it. Perhaps that blessing is the sound itself, not heard, but felt. The vibration that reminds the soul it was once part of something vast, something eternal. When the sea is calm, you can almost imagine the city as it was. Streets glimmering with salt light, temples open to the horizon, priests in white standing barefoot on marble, their faces turned to the dawn. 1,000 bells rising together, the sound flowing over the waves like wings. And then silence. A silence that never ended, only deepened, until it became song once more. For sound never truly dies. It only changes its vessel. The bells of Naratha still ring, their tones carried not through air, but through memory, resonating in the water, in the blood, in the quiet pulse beneath your own breath. And as you drift now, listening to the hush between heartbeats, you might sense it too, that faint, ancient ringing just beyond perception. A reminder that even in the deepest silence, something beautiful is still speaking. Perhaps it is the ocean itself, remembering what it once held. Perhaps it is the world, remembering you. High in a forgotten mountain range, where clouds move like slow tides and air thins into silence, there lies a garden no season claims. Travelers who have found it describe a place neither alive nor dead, where flowers bloom out of frost, and vines coil through stone as though time itself has lost its way. The villagers of the valley below call it Hadira al-Zaman, the Garden of Stillness. Few dare climb that far anymore. The path is steep and veiled with mist, and at its summit, the wind hums in strange harmonies, as if carrying the remnants of a long-vanished prayer. And so the story continues. A kingdom that returns only to vanish, a mirage that remembers itself in fragments. Perhaps it was never meant to be found, only felt. Perhaps the true kingdom is not buried under the sand but within the silence of those who look for it, within the longing that drives us to seek what cannot be touched. Long ago, monks built a sanctuary there. Their order was devoted not to a god of creation, but to the study of impermanence. They believed that every leaf, every droplet, every sigh of wind contained the memory of eternity, and that to witness decay without sorrow was the closest one could come to enlightenment. But something happened upon that mountain. The chronicles end abruptly, the final entry written in a hand trembling and uneven. The sun has halted, the shadows have ceased to move. When explorers rediscovered the site centuries later, they found the monastery collapsed but the garden untouched. Flowers grew from the cracks of shattered marble, unfaded even after lifetimes. The air was thick, almost suspended. Even the leaves seemed reluctant to rustle. It is said that the monks once kept an hourglass at the heart of their cloister, a vessel of crystal filled not with sand, but with powdered moonstone. Each dawn, they would turn it, watching the light pass through the falling dust, measuring their meditations by its gentle descent. Until one morning, the dust simply stopped. It hovered midair, luminous, unmoving. From that moment, nothing within the garden changed. The petals froze in bloom, water ceased to ripple, birds vanished from the sky. Yet the scent of jasmine and cedar still lingers, and the air carries a faint hum, like the note of a string stretched beyond sound. Some scientists have speculated about magnetic anomalies in the region, or gases that alter perception. But even they admit that something in the garden resists measurement. Clocks stop, compasses spin. The longer one stays, the slower the heart seems to beat. There are stories of those who lingered too long. A poet who climbed the mountain in 1890 returned only days later, though his journal suggests he believed years had passed. There was no sun, he wrote, only a silver light that neither rose nor fell. The air shimmered like breath upon glass. When he was asked what he saw, he answered softly, I saw the world forgetting how to end. It is said that time sleeps there still, not dead, but dreaming. Some monks believed the garden was a wound in creation, where the river of moments had paused to reflect upon itself. Others thought it was a sanctuary gifted to humanity, proof that eternity was not in the heavens but hidden among roots and stone. When night falls again, and the stars emerge over the dunes like scattered embers, the desert returns to stillness. The horizon fades into the color of ash, and the world exhales. The mirage sleeps. Imagine walking through it. The air so still it feels holy. Dew clings to every petal but never falls. A single butterfly hovers endlessly mid-flight, its wings open in silent devotion. You pass a broken statue, its eyes filled with moss, yet its face looks peaceful, as though it too has learned the art of waiting. You find the hourglass, half buried in vines, its crystal still faintly glowing. The moonstone dust inside remains suspended, luminous, like captured breath. You lift it gently, and for a moment something stirs, a tremor so faint it could be imagined. Then stillness again. Perhaps the garden was never meant to be found by those who measure the world in minutes and years. Perhaps it exists for the weary, for those whose hearts have moved too fast for too long, who need to remember what stillness feels like. In this place, death and life are not opposites. They are merely different verses of the same hymn. When you finally step away, the mountain seems to exhale. The mist folds back around the path, hiding the garden once more. And though your feet return to the world below, a part of you remains in that suspended air, in that quiet space where even time was allowed to rest. As you drift now, imagine that stillness entering your breath. Let the seconds soften, the rhythm slow, the world hold itself gently around you. For there will come a moment, maybe in dream, maybe in eternity, when you will return to that mountain, to that luminous hush, and find the dust within the glass beginning to fall again. And when it does, perhaps it will not mark the passing of time, but its awakening. A reminder that even what sleeps forever can rise once more in silence and light. When the wind moves through the hollow bones of the old cathedral, the air itself begins to sing. The sound is faint, softer than breath, lighter than ash. But those who have heard it say it feels alive, like something half-remembered by the earth. The cathedral stands upon a hill no longer marked on maps, its stones eaten by centuries of rain. Ivy climbs the spire where bells once hung, and wildflowers grow in pews where kings once knelt. But even in ruin, the place seems to breathe. The light that filters through its broken roof does not illuminate. It glows, thin, golden, particulate, like the memory of sunlight rather than the thing itself. Somewhere in that silence, a bell may ring, faint, distant, carried by the wind. Or perhaps it is only your heartbeat echoing against the walls of imagination. It was built, according to what remains of the old archives, not for worship but for resonance. The architects believed that every human voice, when raised in harmony, released a fragment of the divine, that the echo of a song could bridge the mortal and the eternal. The cathedral's vast chambers were carved with impossible precision, each arch tuned to capture a different tone of human longing. For centuries, choirs sang here. Hymns for rain, for birth, for mourning, for peace. Travelers wrote of voices so pure they made the air shimmer, as though the stones themselves were joining in the prayer. Then came the silence. No one knows when the last song was sung. The great doors collapsed, the walls cracked, but the echo never left. Some say the music sank into the stone, waiting for the right breath to awaken it again. Others whisper that the cathedral sings by itself now, when no one is near, a ghostly choir woven from dust and light. Modern researchers once visited to study the phenomenon. They brought microphones, recorders, instruments sensitive enough to catch the sound of atoms vibrating. And yet, what they captured could not be explained. In the stillness of midnight, when all wind ceased, a resonance began, low at first, then rising like a tide. Frequencies intertwined, forming tones that shifted between harmony and silence, as if the air itself was remembering. When they played the recording back later, faint voices could be heard within layered human wordless. One of the engineers described it simply, It sounded like grief learning to glow, but perhaps the truth is older than science. Legend says that when the world was young, the gods created light from sound, that every star was born from a note sung into the void. And when those notes faded, their echoes became the dust that fills the space between worlds. This cathedral, it is said, was built upon one such echo, a place where the veil between sound and light grows thin enough to shimmer. At sunset, when the light falls low through the broken rose window, motes of dust drift upward instead of down. They spiral in beams of gold, moving like living constellations. Some witnesses swear that, for an instant, the dust forms human shapes, outlines of choristers with open mouths, luminous and silent. Then the light shifts, and they scatter, returning to air. To stand there is to feel both sorrow and serenity, the ache of what has been lost and the beauty of what remains. The song is no longer music, but memory, suspended in vibration. The kingdom beneath the sun has vanished once more, leaving behind only its breath, a shimmer, a hum, a question. A priest who once tended the ruins said he came to understand the choir as the breath of all who ever sang there, still circling, still rising. The music is not gone, he said. It is only listening to itself now. And maybe that is all heaven ever was. The moment sound becomes light, and silence learns to listen. If you close your eyes, you can hear it. Faint harmonies woven into the hush of night. Not loud enough to wake you, but enough to guide you softly towards sleep. The tones fold over one another, dust and light, breath and time, until all becomes one long exhale. The cathedral glows faintly now, its walls transparent with centuries. The last beam of dusk filters through the rose window, scattering into color. In that light, the ruins no longer seem ruined. The air hums, the silence blooms, and just before darkness falls completely, you can almost hear them, the voices of the long-forgotten, singing not of sorrow, nor faith, nor loss, but of continuity, of everything that ever was and will be again. A choir without beginning or end. A hymn of dust and light. As you drift into the quiet beyond words, you carry their song with you, not through the ears, but through the heart. The kind of music that cannot be replayed, only remembered. Perhaps that is the true sound of history. Not noise, not story, but echo. The slow, endless echo of creation breathing in and out through time. And when sleep finally takes you, the last note lingers like the faintest shimmer on water. Neither ending nor beginning, only being. And as the listener drifts towards sleep, that question lingers in the air like dust suspended in light. The choir of dust and light continues to sing. And somewhere in the soundless spaces between dreams, you are part of the harmony. Night has deepened. The wind has settled. The stories have finished their speaking, yet their echoes still move softly through the dark. You have walked through deserts that shimmered with memory, through temples and maps and rivers that forgot their names. You have followed the hum of stones that remember, the songs of bells that still ring beneath the sea. You have stood before gates unfinished, before kings who hid their faces to outlast time. And in each place, something quiet awaited, a silence older than faith, listening still. The world is not built of stone and sky alone. It is built of remembrance, of vibration, of the breath that lingers after every word is gone. Perhaps that is what the ancients knew, that to survive is not to remain but to echo, that every ruin, every dust mote turning in a shaft of light, carries the pulse of everything that ever was. Was it ever real, or are all our memories just mirages, waiting for the sun to rise again? The kingdom beneath the sun still glimmers in the heat. The map of smoke still curls through unseen air. The stone hums under the stars. The river flows without name, carrying memory through the veins of the earth. The library breathes through wind and ash. The masks watch from the dark. The bells sing in the deep. The garden waits in its still hour. And the cathedral of dust and light continues to shine, not in sound, but in silence. All of them are dreaming now, and you are within their dream. There are whispers of a map that cannot be held for long, one that shifts, curls, and fades like smoke the moment light touches it. It was said to have been kept in a monastery high in the Anatolian hills, where the wind carried the scent of myrrh and old parchment. The monks who tended it believed the map did not lead to any place upon the earth, but to something within it, a memory buried beneath the pulse of time. Because in truth, these were never separate stories, only reflections of one vast and ancient rhythm, the rhythm of creation and forgetting, of time and its quiet opposite. It moves through everything, through the grain of sand, the curl of smoke, the pulse within your wrist, the same breath that moved through the priests, through the kings, through the stars themselves, now moves gently through you. Listen, the night no longer asks for understanding, only for stillness. Let the echoes fade one by one. Let the dust settle, the tide rest, the air fall into calm. You have wandered far through forgotten ages, and now the journey turns inward, toward that small, sacred space where time ceases to measure, where thought dissolves into being. There, between heartbeat and breath, the ancient world waits, not to be rediscovered, but to be remembered. The mirage flickers. They called it the breath of the world. The stars blink once, slowly, and everything folds back into silence. Sleep now, traveler of forgotten kingdoms. The stories will keep their watch. The world will turn in its quiet way. And somewhere, beneath the veil of dream, the forbidden kingdom breathes again. In dust, in light, in you. The map was drawn, they said, with ink mixed from volcanic ash and lamp oil, its lines alive under flame. When the candlelight flickered, continents bent and reshaped themselves. Rivers vanished, reappeared, and sometimes entire coastlines seemed to breathe. One could spend hours watching the map move, as though the earth itself were exhaling secrets through the parchment. When European explorers arrived centuries later, they found only fragments, charred scrolls and smoke-black walls, remnants of a fire that had devoured the monastery long before. The travelers noted that the ashes still carried a faint fragrance of cedar and something metallic, almost sweet. Among them was a half-burned scrap showing a curve that matched no known coast. Its markings resembled neither Arabic nor Greek, but a language made of spirals and breaths. Scholars would later dismiss it as decorative patterning. But some, the quiet few, saw it differently. They compared those lines to satellite maps of the ocean floor and found shapes too precise to ignore. Deep beneath the waves, off the coast of Crete, lay ridges that mirrored the burnt markings exactly. It was as though someone, centuries before modern navigation, had traced the bones of a drowned world. It is here that the story deepens, not into certainty, but into echo. Some accounts tell of a monk named Iskander, the last guardian of the library before the fire. In the days leading to its destruction, he was seen walking the cloisters at night, speaking softly to himself. He carried the map to the roof every dusk, laying it beneath the sky until the stars appeared. It was said that when he did this, the ink began to glow faintly, reflecting constellations that no longer exist. One witness described it as the heavens remembering what they once were. When the fire came, whether by accident or decree, the map was consumed in moments. But there are those who believe it survived, hidden in another form. Some say the ashes were gathered and scattered across the desert winds. Others claim the map was never truly destroyed, for smoke cannot be burned, and memory cannot die. In 1924, a Turkish historian named Halim Bey found a curious inscription on the interior wall of a collapsed caravanserai near Konya. It read, "Only those who can breathe the world will see its true shape." The inscription style matched the era of the monastery's fall. To this day, the meaning remains a riddle. But some who study the ruins say that when wind passes through the broken arches at sunset, it creates a sound, a low, humming tone, like breath drawn through hollow stone. And for a fleeting moment, fine trails of dust spiral upward in shifting patterns, forming curves that resemble coastlines. Then the light fades and the illusion is gone. Perhaps this is how the map survives, not upon paper or stone, but in the air itself. The earth exhales, and for a heartbeat, its ancient memory takes form. Those who travel that region sometimes carry incense when they camp. They burn it and watch the smoke twist into shapes, tracing invisible paths across the night sky. Many report seeing the same pattern: a spiral, an arc, a single line that disappears into the dark. Some believe it points toward the lost lands of the Bronze Age, perhaps Atlantis by another name. Others think it leads inward into the geography of the soul, where every forgotten place still breathes. In a world that measures truth in evidence and proof, the map etched in smoke remains a gentle rebellion, a reminder that not all paths can be charted, and not all discoveries are meant to last. Its purpose was never to lead men to treasure or empire, but to reflection, to the quiet realization that the earth is alive, that every breath we take echoes a breath it once gave. When dawn arrives, the wind carries away the last traces of smoke, leaving only the scent of something that might have been sacred. The monk's chants, the burnt scrolls, the shifting lines, all dissolve into morning light. What remains is silence, vast and patient, waiting for another night to reveal the hidden cartography of memory. And as you drift towards sleep, imagine that fragile parchment hovering before you, lines moving like waves, the air shimmering with unseen shapes. You reach out, and it curls softly, vanishing into mist. Perhaps the map never led to a kingdom, nor to a city, nor to any world we could walk upon. Perhaps it was always guiding us to this, to the quiet awareness that everything sacred is made of smoke and breath. And somewhere, in the stillness between one exhale and the next, the world itself unfolds, just long enough to be seen. In the valley where the sand turns to salt, there stands a single pillar of stone, smooth as bone, dark as midnight rain. No one remembers who raised it or when. It rises from the earth like the last breath of a forgotten prayer, alone amid wind and silence. Travelers who pass through the valley at dusk speak of a faint vibration underfoot, a hum that stirs when the air cools. If one places a hand upon the stone, they say, it begins to tremble, as if something deep within is trying to speak. The Bedouin call it the whisperer, a relic of a temple buried beneath centuries of sand. Archaeologists have measured the sound and found frequencies so low they lie just below human hearing. But when amplified, the vibrations form patterns, spirals, echoes, tones that resemble the cadence of breath. Long before modern instruments, those who lived near the valley believed the stone was alive. Ancient tablets from nearby ruins, fragments of Aramaic, half erased, speak of a sect known as the Keepers of the Sound. They built their temples not to honor gods of fire or war, but to honor the vibration of existence itself. To them, every voice, every word, every sigh left an imprint on the world. They believed that stone, when carved in sacred proportion, could remember those sounds, holding them like seeds within its heart. The whisperer, they said, was their greatest creation, a vessel for memory, built to store the voices of the faithful for eternity. And perhaps, in a way, it succeeded. When night falls, the temperature drops sharply, and the valley becomes a mirror of stars. The wind softens, and sometimes, in that fragile stillness, a murmur rises, faint and layered, as if many voices are speaking all at once. It is never loud, never clear, more like a sigh carried across distance, shaped into language that dissolves as soon as it forms. To some, it sounds like chanting, to others like weeping. Scientists call it a natural resonance, caused by the wind tunneling through fissures in the surrounding cliffs. But for those who listen with closed eyes, the sound feels deliberate, like something aware, remembering. In 1937, a French acoustician named Armand Duval came here with recording equipment. He spent 7 nights beside the stone, sleeping beneath canvas and stars. On the final night, he claimed the hum changed, rising in tone, becoming almost human. The next morning, when he played back the recording, he heard faint syllables between the waves of static. 3 words, he said, repeated again and again, "We are still here." The recording was lost years later in a museum fire, though some say a copy survived, buried deep in an archive in Cairo. Yet even without proof, the legend of the stone endures, a monument that remembers, even when the world forgets. Some scholars have tried to trace its origin, linking it to megalithic structures found across the ancient world, the dolmens of the Levant, the standing stones of Nabta Playa, the sound chambers beneath Malta's temples. Each of these places shares a strange property. When sound is made within their walls, it reverberates in patterns that calm the human heartbeat. Some frequencies, researchers found, align perfectly with the rhythm of REM sleep, the state between waking and dreaming. It is as though our ancestors built sanctuaries not for worship, but for resonance, to enter a harmony where the self dissolves into vibration. The Whisperer might be the last of them, a solitary survivor of that forgotten craft. Its makers may have understood something we no longer do, that memory is not written in ink or stone, but in the trembling of air, in the invisible pulse that connects all things. Stand beside it long enough and you begin to feel that truth. The sound is not just heard. It moves through you, finding the spaces between heartbeats, the hollows behind the ribs. For a moment, it feels as though the stone is breathing, and that breath is shared. Some believe that when we die, our final exhale joins that same current, becoming part of the world's quiet song. If that is true, then the Whisperer carries not only ancient voices, but every word ever spoken in longing, every confession made to the wind, every farewell carried by dust. And perhaps that is why it hums, not as a ghostly warning, but as a reassurance, that nothing spoken in love or sorrow is ever truly lost. It all returns to the great vibration, where silence listens. When dawn comes, the stone cools and grows still. This hum sinks back into the earth. The valley brightens, and all that remains is the faint ring in the listener's chest. A memory of sound that feels like warmth. As you drift now, imagine your breath joining that unseen chorus. The same frequency, the same quiet pulse that has carried every whisper since time began. The Whisperer remains, its shadow long and slender across the sand. It remembers, it listens, and when the sun sets again, it will hum once more, softly, endlessly, waiting for another voice to find its way home. In a forgotten valley of crumbling stone, half veiled by vines and silence, there stands a gate that leads nowhere. Its pillars lean like old memories, and between them hangs only air. No wall, no threshold, no sign of what once was. Yet beneath centuries of dust, the arch still gleams faintly, etched with constellations that do not belong to our sky. Under moonlight, the carvings shimmer, a scattering of stars that once mapped a heaven long vanished. Astronomers who have studied them say the patterns resemble an ancient sky, older than any known chart. The constellations curve differently, their alignments echoing a celestial order that seems almost reversed, as if the heavens had once looked upon another world entirely. The locals call it Bab al-Nujum, the Gate of the Stars. To them, it was a place of communion, where priests stood at twilight to whisper to the cosmos, believing the universe could hear. They carved their sky into stone so that when their world fell, their voices might still rise through the pattern. The gate is unfinished. The topmost section, where the arch should close, ends abruptly. The final star is missing, the one said to mark the passage between heaven and earth. Ancient scripts found nearby speak of a door to eternity left ajar, a sacred work abandoned before its last breath. Perhaps it was never meant to be completed. Archaeologists have unearthed fragments of a temple nearby, floors paved with mica that still glint faintly under sand, and fragments of bronze mirrors shaped like crescents. These were not tools of worship, but of alignment. The builders had measured time by reflection, capturing the light of stars upon polished metal to mark the turning of seasons. In the center stood the gate, not as an entrance but as a compass to the eternal. When the empire that raised it fell to drought and dust, the site was left to the night. The vines came, the winds shifted, and the constellations above slowly forgot their names. Yet the gate remained, open and waiting, as though still expecting the final star to return. Legends tell of a solitary astronomer who came centuries later, a wanderer carrying scrolls of the old skies. He believed the missing star was no celestial body at all, but an echo within the heart. The heavens, he wrote, are not above us. They are within, and their completion lies in the silence we keep. He spent his final nights sleeping before the gate, tracing the carvings with his fingertips, humming to the air. When the locals found his camp abandoned, his scrolls lay open, soaked by dew. Upon them, faint ink lines formed a perfect arch, the missing curve drawn by condensation, as if finished by the breath of night itself. Some modern physicists have marveled at the structure's precision. The gate aligns perfectly with the solstice sun, casting a narrow beam through its hollow frame only twice a year, once in midsummer, once in midwinter. For a few moments, the valley glows, the carvings flicker, and the air feels charged with some ancient intention. Then, as quickly as it comes, the light fades, leaving behind only the slow hum of cicadas and the scent of wild thyme. To stand before the gate is to feel both awe and ache, a sense of something vast just beyond reach. Many who visit speak of dizziness, of heartbeats that seem to slow in rhythm with the wind. One traveler described it as standing on the edge of unfinished creation, listening for the last note of a forgotten song. Perhaps that is what the builders meant to leave behind, not a path but a pause, a reminder that every act of creation is both beginning and surrender. If you listen closely as night deepens, you may hear a faint resonance, not from the earth, but from above. The stars shimmer, uncertain, and for a moment they seem to rearrange themselves, as though trying to remember their former shape. The missing star flickers somewhere in the dark, just beyond the eye's reach, like a secret withheld by eternity itself. And when dawn arrives, the gate returns to shadow, its carvings fading back into stone. The sky brightens, and the air grows warm, but something lingers, a feeling that the night is not truly gone, only folded behind the light. As you drift now, imagine standing there at twilight, the air cool against your skin, the valley breathing slowly. The stars begin to bloom above you, scattered and infinite. You trace the arch with your gaze, from base to peak, and pause at the space where the last star should be. The wind passes through, carrying the soft sound of your breath into the hollow. Perhaps that is all the gate ever needed, a single moment of attention, a human breath to complete what the heavens left undone. The gate of unfinished stars remains open, its silence both question and answer. Some say when the final night of the world comes, the last star will descend through that hollow and close the circle. Others believe the circle was always meant to remain incomplete, so that light and darkness might forever meet, but never merge. For now, it stands as it has always stood, a doorway to nothing, a passage to everything, an unfinished prayer carved against the sky. There once flowed a river that no map remembers. It wandered through lands now buried in silence, where reeds whispered to empty skies and the air carried the scent of salt and thyme. Its waters were said to glow faintly under moonlight, tracing a silver path across forgotten plains, a road made not for travelers of earth, but for memories seeking their way home. The ancients called it the river without memory, though that name came much later, long after the world forgot the sound it once made. To speak of it now is to breathe into a ghost, a current of water that once bound kingdoms, temples, and the dreams of men into one continuous thread. In old Persian hymns, there is mention of a sacred waterway called Zarda, believed to flow between the breath of heaven and the bones of the earth. Historians cannot find it. No source, no delta, no mark upon any known terrain. And yet, from Mesopotamian clay tablets to the poetry of the Indus, the same current reappears, always unnamed, always luminous, always vanishing into the unknown. Some scholars think it was metaphor, a river of the spirit, the path between life and afterlife. But others believe it was real, a physical stream that shifted with the centuries, retreating underground, perhaps beneath deserts that now sleep in dust. Satellite scans of the empty quarter show the ghost of a dry riverbed running like a scar beneath the dunes, curving in shapes eerily similar to ancient depictions. But when excavations were attempted, the sands reclaimed every mark by morning. The Bedouins still tell a story of that place. They say the river was alive, and that once every 1,000 years, it forgot its name. The forgetting was not a curse, but a renewal. For in their telling, names are bindings, and when a name grows too heavy with memory, the thing it belongs to must let go, or drown beneath the weight of remembrance. So, when the river's name grew too full of centuries, it rose one night under a blood moon and spoke to the stars. It whispered its own name into the wind, then released it, setting it free into silence. The next morning, the river flowed without identity, without past, its surface smooth as glass. Those who drank from it found their minds emptied of sorrow. Their memories of pain dissolved like ink in water. And for a brief time, the world was at peace. But peace, like water, does not stay. When the river's name was gone, the cities that depended on it lost their reflection. Their wells dried, their towers crumbled. Without a name to anchor it, the river began to fade. First in maps, then in speech, then in sight. By the time new empires rose, it was gone entirely, leaving behind only mirages that shimmered at dusk and the faint scent of wet stone after rain. In 1972, a geologist named Dr. Armin Keller led an expedition to trace ancient waterways beneath Arabia, deep beneath the dunes of Rub al-Khali. His team recorded traces of a massive subterranean flow, water moving silently under pressure, older than any civilization above it. He called it Stream X. When they drilled for samples, the water that emerged was perfectly clear, but when exposed to air, it shimmered with a faint silver hue before evaporating entirely. Tests found no minerals, no bacteria, only purity, as if it had never touched the earth at all. Keller's journal, found years later after his disappearance, contained a single line written in his final entry. The river still flows, but it has forgotten even the meaning of water. Perhaps that was what he meant to find, not the river itself, but the truth it carried, that everything which forgets its name becomes free. Imagine standing at its vanished banks. The night is still, the air heavy with warmth, and under the stars, the earth hums softly, a resonance deep and low, like the echo of distant water. You look across the valley, and for a moment you think you see it. A shimmer, a gleam, the faint outline of a current winding between stones. It glows like breath, faint and sacred, before folding back into shadow. The wind stirs, the silence deepens. You realize that the river's course was never meant to be found again, that perhaps it was never meant to remain. Its forgetting is its survival, its anonymity the key to eternity. And maybe, in some unseen layer beneath our own, it still flows, not as water, but as memory turned light. A river of silence connecting all who have ever been, carrying the unnamed essence of existence through the veins of the earth. When dawn approaches, the first light sweeps across the dunes, and for a heartbeat, the sand gleams as if wet. Then the illusion fades, the desert inhales, and the river slips back into dreaming. Some truths can only be known in absence. Some names are sacred precisely because they are forgotten. And so, the river that forgot its name continues its journey, not upon the land, but through time itself, winding endlessly through the spaces between what was and what remains. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the current beneath you, silent, luminous, eternal. Feel it passing under your dreams, washing the dust from memory, whispering without words, that what we lose does not vanish. It simply learns how to flow unseen. In the shifting heart of a desert that no longer has a name, the wind once uncovered the ruins of a library. It was said that when the dunes parted, the world exhaled, and from that breath rose walls of scorched stone, shelves of blackened cedar, and fragments of scrolls turned to dust the moment light touched them. No one knows who built it or why it burned. Some say it was a sanctuary of forbidden wisdom, a place where history itself was rewritten with each new age. Others believe it was a temple disguised as a library, a house of silence where words were used not to record, but to release. The first explorers to reach it in the early 1900s found only the skeleton of knowledge. Pillars melted into glass, inscriptions half erased, ashes so fine they drifted into the air at every step. Yet even in ruin, something remained alive. When the wind passed through the open archways, it produced a sound like whispers, syllables barely formed, voices untraceable. Some heard prayers. Others thought it laughter. A few refused to speak of it at all. The local nomads called it Beit al-Dakira al-Rih, the House of the Remembering Wind. They warned that the place did not store memory, but consumed it. Those who entered with knowledge left with uncertainty. Those who came seeking truth returned with silence. And perhaps that was its true purpose, to cleanse the weight of knowing from the soul.